Hello and welcome everyone. I'm C.S.Gilmore and today we're going to talk about the Warhammer 40k book, Day of Ascension by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So let me see if I can get better imagery here for you. Day of Ascension. Right about there. Let me get a close up on the... There we go. Alright, so if you haven't guessed from the image, this is a Genestealer cult book. It's an interesting one too. So, this is set in the later stages of a Genestealer cult infestation issue on a Mechanicus world. On the forged world of Morad, the machines never stop and the work never ends. The population dwell in the mines and factories to protect humanity from the monsters in the void, while the Adeptus Mechanicus enjoy lives of palatial comfort. Genestealer Gamut Triskelion seeks to end this stagnant corruption. And I'm going to skip the rest of that backing there. But, yeah. So, there's a Genestealer cult on this planet. And then there is Genestealer Gamut Triskelion. He's a Mechanicus guy. And as I recall the story, it begins with some issues for the Mechanicus. Primarily, their leader, the Fabricator General, or whatever the title for this planet was, planet's leader was, gets killed. Assassinated even. And then you got all the other, now you've got all the other head tech priests, including the Genestealer here, vying to become the next leader. Well, that's a bit of a mess. So the Mechanicus is currently leaderless with some competitors trying to decide who's going to be the new leader of everything for the planet. And Genestealer here discovers the Genestealer cult. You might think, okay, cool, he found the cult. We should purge this now, right? No, he's dumb. And he's like, we could use this because this cult has a I forget what they call him in the cult, but one of the guys who tends to experiment with the genetics and everything more so than and helps them like become stronger and better. Anyway, the cult has one of these guys who runs a clinic to help the people. He makes them stronger. He makes them better. As I recall, the assassin is a clerk in the Mechanicus, and she has a brother who is a... What did they call those units? I don't know the Genestealer cult units as well as some of the other ones. Big hulking, like extra muscly, huge monstrosity of a guy, of a Genestealer cultist. Her brother was sick at one point and dying because, Mechanicus planets tend to not have the best health plans. You're just another cog in the machine as far as they're concerned, and you're easily replaced. So what if you got lung rot or something else? We'll get another person to take your place when you're dead. And we'll probably servitorize you in the process as well. Anyhow, so you've got all sorts of Genestealer type stuff going on. You've got the Genestealer cult itself, and it's a pretty advanced cult. Like, you see evidences throughout the story of this is like the final stages. They're talking about how we're going to be liberated by the angels. when they come and everything like that. And yeah, and this dude, instead of going, I should probably tell the other Mechanicus about this and we should purge this whole thing right here, right now, it says, like, no, I'm going to capture this clinic leader and some of the others, like, that I know were involved in the assassination, and I'm going to make them work for me right now. They're going to tell me all about their methodology because the flesh is weak. And, like, one of the biggest problems our workforce has is because isn't the machines, it's and everything, it's the remaining bits of flesh on everyone, that the remaining pieces of them that aren't as strong as the machine. But what if we could use like genetic engineering and adjustments to make them stronger? Because this guy here, he's been altering these people in ways that have been able to like make their skin more resilient to radiation and other issues. They're not as likely to fall sick. They're stronger. They're able to do more labor. They're better workers. We can use this. Because that's a smart thing to do. Apparently he didn't read much of the docket on how a Genestealer cult works, or didn't have access to it. But yeah. Also, he's pretty confident that the Mechanicus can put down any insurrection that were to happen. Now, I don't remember all of the story. There's a whole lot here of him, of like the Mechanicus's politics, which it was an interesting story into that, as well as the Genestealer cult layout and how its functioning can work. There's some questions of questioning their faith, I believe, comes up with the clerk assassin at some point. And as I recall, also she is like they have a Genestealer cults usually, other than like the Genestealer uh uh that creates the cult in the first place. They usually have a strong psyker. What were they called? A sanctus, I believe, who serves as kind of like a matriarchal role in the cult, but also as a like second hand to the Genestealer leadership. And the assassin, I believe, has some discussions. Their leader, their psyker leader, there is actually really old, and there's some despair over whether the angels are really coming occasionally. Like if because it feels like they've been taking so long, and they're so tired of the oppression of the Mechanicus and having to survive in these horrible conditions, and some of them may like they may not live to see that happen. Well, some interesting things happen in this book, other than the Mechanicus being dumb. Big surprise! It wouldn't be the first time they've done something they really shouldn't do in the name of let's find out some new knowledge that totally isn't heretical and or will doom us all. They how should I discuss this best? Lots of things happen. Long story short, the insurrection does happen, and this is an interesting story because the cult wins. Even though the Mechanicus generally more or less have the upper hand, it feels like for a lot of it, the cult wins in the end. Partly because they succeed in summoning the Tyranid swarm. And so, back up, invasion. Congratulations, you get to become one with the angels. Ooh, totally not just gonna get murdered horribly and then dissolved and turned into another Tyranid. Oh wait, yeah, you are. But hey, you're all brain wiped mind controlled, whatever. So who cares? But yeah, the Mechanicus lose in the long run. Uh, but it's an interesting loss because they bring in. It brings up a really interesting point that I feel like could have so many possibilities for like if they were to implement it into the tabletop gameplay and for other storyline perhaps, because this cult's been here a while amongst the population, and the Mechanicus draws from that population for things like their Skitarii. Now, generally, the Skitarii, you'd think, part of the reason Mechanicus loses is because they have been drawing Skitarii, creating Skitarii from members of this cult who have been, because they're the healthy and the strong ones, they're perfect candidates for becoming Skitarii and being good soldiers. And the problem is, the Mechanicus finds out that even though they've replaced a lot of them, of the Skitarii tends to end up very robotic. And, they don't act on their own as much. They follow orders, commands, and they're very robotic in a lot of ways. They're very servitory, but higher functioning. And that higher functioning part kind of comes back to bite the Mechanicus in this regard because, yeah, they're Skitarii and they've got some programming going on with them. But turns out it's overridden by genetics and psychic manipulation. So all these Skitarii that were actually Genestealer cultists, and thus also part Genestealer, yeah, they can break their programming, and they're on the Genestealer side. So, whoops, problems. But it's a really cool concept, I felt, that really hit on something that I don't feel like a lot of the Genestealer cults really hit on it as fully as they could. Of how the Genestealers can incorporate so much into like establishing their cult, especially when it's had generations to not just be a hey, these are some people we infected and are highly mind controlling to make them believe we're not a horrible alien monstrosity and whatnot, and that their children aren't alien monstrosities, but rather it's come to the point of this is so far along that they're just people that grew up like this is their religion. This is what they believe. They don't need to be mind controlled nonstop in order to do this. And they do still have some, the main this assassin clerk character has some doubts occasionally, but she always keeps. And there were some points where I was like, "Are she actually going to like maybe turn against the cult at some point?" But no, yeah, she has some doubts, but she holds to the cult and serving and becoming what like serving the cultists' goals and bringing about the destruction of this world, or in their eyes, the salvation of this world. Because the Tyranids come, and it gets really interesting because at the end of this, the clerk lives through this book. They don't even get dissolved and become a Tyranid. They live through the book because while the Tyranids are invading the planet, some of them get on escape. So these cultists get on escape shuttles, especially these more human-looking cultists. They get on escape shuttles and take off to flee into space, because not to flee the Tyranids, but because they have to put on that appearance of fleeing the Tyranids. And the clerk becomes one of the new leaders, one of the new sanctuses, I believe. Or I'm probably getting the name mixed up. It's been a while since I went through the Genestealer cult's hierarchies. But she becomes the new leader of the cult. They're other than Genestealers themselves, and they she leaves under with the understanding we have to postpone our ascension. We have to postpone our ascension and our becoming one with the angels. While most of the cult is getting absorbed in becoming one with the angels, we're a part of it that has to continue on because we need to go and spread to other planets, to spread the uh, this knowledge and this liberation to other planets. And so, yeah, they escape. They head off, and the Tyranids let them go because it's all part of the plan. These cultists will go out. Ah, we fled the Tyranid invasion of this planet. Ah, new home, refugees. Establish a new cult. Yep, totally not a problem. So yeah, there are some things there. I'm definitely skipping a few characters, and I'm like there are some more characters involved other than the main tech priest guy and the Genitor. The Genitor, Gamut Triskelion. Yeah, there's more than him and that clerk. There's the clinic leader. There was another member of the cult. There was a. Why can I not remember the name of that class of them? But yeah, the more of a fighter. There's her brother, who is one of those big hulking brutes of a Genestealer cultist type that is great for just melee. You need something chucked around it by sheer muscle. He's your guy. And ultimately, the book was just mostly fun because you got to explore the nature of a cult, of a Genestealer cult infestation at this latest stage. But before the Tyranids actually fully arrive and start the terraforming process, so they're still having to be under the radar, you get a bit of a look at some of the Mechanicus when they aren't functioning very well. Um, I feel like the characters were. I would say downside. I do feel like the Mechanicus wasn't the smartest and could have maybe done better. Like I feel like they were written a little dumb. If that makes sense. Like not I mean that they were badly written, but that they were written as being a little dumber than they should have been. But that tends to happen in a lot of books. I find when the Mechanicus isn't the main characters. But that tends to happen in most Warhammer books. Is the main character groups tend to be the big, the most highlighted, the most intelligent, the most working on it, everything, and then the enemies and other things tend to be just a little below them in the we didn't think this through properly scale, or we aren't quite as good at fighting, or whatnot. And there's a few books where that sometimes balances out really well, and sometimes it doesn't. And this was one where I felt like the Mechanicus really dropped the ball. So mostly it was due to this one guy being an idiot and not telling the others about the hey, there's a Genestealer cult over here. I found it. We should probably purge the whole thing to the ground. Oh wait, no, too late. They already summoned their angels. Now we're all doomed. Totally on this guy's shoulders. This guy was 100% his fault at this point. Though arguably it was probably too late for the planet to begin with. The fact that the cult was acting out enough to assassinate the leader of the Mechanicus and begin sowing discord suggests that the fleet was already getting close, and they were starting to get the signal of we need to start doing things. So if I remember correctly, there was doubt in the cultists, like are they really coming? Because it had been extra long, more so than they thought was supposed to be the case. And so they were also just doing this as like out of desperation to try to break free from the Mechanicus' yoke and the basically slave conditions that the Mechanicus tends to keep their workforce under. So yeah, Fun book. Good times, especially if you're a Genestealer cultist player. You probably should read this if you haven't already. It's a fun book. It's well written for the most part, and you get a good look at how the characters behave, how the different uh, units inside a Genestealer cult interact with each other and behave and work towards the greater goal of the Genestealer cult. Uh, um, yeah, the clerk, for example, was a very deep cover agent. She was an assassin type, but she was, or actually, no, I might be remembering wrong. She might not. Now I think about it, she might not have been the assassin. She might have just been the one who opened the door for the assassin. But I think she might have been involved in the assassination either way. I can't remember if she did it herself or not, though. I can't quite remember. I do know that she was deep cover for sure, though. She had electus, which are like mechanical electronic tattoos that can be used for like key card. I need to open this door. Open for me. And she had ways to alter her. She had ways to change hers so she could break into other areas. She had some hacking skill, if I remember right. The characters were interesting and had some depth to them. It was also really interesting to see how the Genestealer cult views themselves in this case before the tyranids show up, and how they view things as the tyranids are showing up, how they view the world. So it was fun for the lore of that. All right, I think that's everything I can really say about this book right now. Is on the ones I would say recommend reading, especially if you're a Genestealer cultist player or even a Tyranid player and want to see this end of things. Because technically, the Genestealer cults, while they are their own faction in the gameplay, they are Tyranids. Ultimately, that is what they are. They're just a sub-faction. The forerunner to the proper invasion force, whatnot. Comments below. Have you read the book? What did you think about it? Favorite parts, least favorite parts? Do you remember for sure some detail I forgot? How did it go? Let's talk about it. Otherwise, I'm thinking I've got some other books I really want to talk about, and I haven't quite decided. I think I want to talk about Deacon of Wounds next, and some of the other horror books. There's also a couple. There's also one called Gothghoul Hollow, which is a fantasy setting horror book. That's one I really liked and I want to share. But I think next is going to be Deacon of Wounds, which is a 40k horror book. I'll get into that one when I discuss it, because it's I think it's up there as one of my favorites. It's the delivery and how it covered things. It was good. But that's it for tonight. So, hit like, hit subscribe if you're new here and haven't done so already to keep up with new releases. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great night. Bye.